Hey, I have a fun story idea and I'd like to pitch it to you. This is my idea for a remake of Back to the Future.
Don't hurt me!
Yes, I know, it's an absolute classic and there is no need whatsoever to remake it, but that's what makes it fun. And this is not saying that there are issues with the movie that need to be fixed. This is just asking, is there another story that can be told with this premise that has just at least the potential to be as beloved? I think I may have come up with the bones for it, but you tell me. Please watch through to the end before you tell me. Okay, first, when I say remake, I do mean the entire trilogy and not just the first one. So the first thing to ask ourselves is, in order to qualify as a remake, what are the elements that we have to include for it to be a Back to the Future movie? There's a number of obvious things. Our lead is high school kid Marty McFly. We also definitely need mad scientist Doc Brown, because otherwise where are we getting the time machine from, let's be honest. They also need to be friends for some reason. Doc has to build a time machine, obviously. Something happens and Marty gets stuck in the past where he meets his parents as teenagers. Marty's mom gets a crush on him and he plays matchmaker with his parents. Marty meets with the younger Doc, and the two of them work together to get back to the future. Difficulties ensue. Then Marty travels to the future with Doc, and they travel farther into the past. There's not as many in the sequels that you have to do because, frankly, they're just not as beloved. In fact, a lot of people have probably never even seen them. They just watch the first one and stop, even though it says to be continued at the end of it. And I'll be honest, the third movie is where I'm going to change things the most because no cowboys. That one always just kind of felt odd and out of place with the other two. Now, the second step, after we have made a list of things that you have to have in order for it to be a Back to the Future movie and thus qualify as a remake that you actually use the title of. The concept of a teenager going back in time and meeting his teenage parents inside of another era is actually something that kind of lends itself to being remade periodically. The ideal time to do this would have been 9 years ago in 2015, so that when Marty traveled back in time, he would have wound up in 1985, which is when the original movie took place, but that ship has sailed. But this is my pitch. So this movie now takes place in 2015, so that problem is fixed. You can come at me about it in the comments. I don't care. This is just a silly idea. Another justification is that when Zemeckis made the original one, he actually didn't have any plans to make a sequel at all. And so there was no broader narrative planned for the trilogy. So a remake planned as a trilogy from the beginning would actually really benefit the sequels because, let's face it, while the original is a stone cold classic, the sequels have not generated the same amount of love. Another thing that we could change that would be a slight improvement and could in fact justify a remake is that in the original, Marty doesn't really have an arc. They did kind of throw in that thing about him hating to be called chicken inside the second one, but that really didn't have any kind of hints or anything in the first one. So in the first one, he doesn't have any actual growth. The character that actually undergoes most of the change is George, the father. So giving Marty some character growth could be a subtle but impactful change that could potentially lead to this remake being accepted. There's a very good chance that some people are going to hate this. We could also justify a remake by taking a different approach to time travel. Back to the Future falls into the multiverse, able to change the past concept that's pretty popular inside of sci-fi. So you could change it to be a closed loop narrative, which is all the changes in the past from the time travel are already baked into the timeline. And that would necessitate story changes, so you wouldn't just be making a one-for-one remake. Another thing, just big change to justify a remake. Like I said, no cowboys for the third movie. Instead, I actually like the idea of him meeting his grandparents. I think that could be funny because that would be in 1955 as well, so throwback to the original. Finally, and this is a serious question, the time machine being now built in 2015, is it still a DeLorean? I can see arguments going both way here. I mean, the DeLorean is an iconic part of the Back to the Future mythos. So for it to be a Back to the Future remake, do you need to have the DeLorean? Or is part of the remake going to be taking another car and making it an iconic part of this one? Then you could even call it the DeLorean trilogy and the Hummer trilogy. I just thought of that now, and I actually kind of like the idea of making a Hummer go 88 miles an hour and turn it into a time machine. I guess you could make it a DeLorean and justify it as Doc Brown, who was, of course, alive inside the 80s, really liked DeLoreans and just decided, I want to make a time machine out of that sucker. And also now there are almost like no real DeLoreans left, and you can get them as a kit and like assemble them yourself. And so that could be a funny joke as like things keep breaking because Doc Brown didn't build the car very well. I don't know. I'm just spitballing at this point. Now, I do have another drastic change in mind, but I'll bring it up when I get to it inside the full pitch. Okay, movie opens. Marty is a skateboarder inside of a punk band, and he has a very sensitive soul. We meet him on top of the school roof with his band, hooking up various wires and equipment and stuff, and they're being very sneaky about it. His phone rings, and it's Doc Brown, and he keeps ignoring it, but Doc Brown keeps calling, so finally he picks it up. Why do you hang out with that guy? Yeah, he's pretty cool once you get to know him. I don't know, man. He's pretty weird. Yeah, well, I'm weird too. Only normal people have to say that they're weird. He has a conversation with Doc. Doc asks him to come meet him that night at the parking lot of an abandoned mall because, of course, it's not the 80s. You had to have a movie set inside of a mall, but now they're all kind of decrepit, so we would make a commentary by having it be at an abandoned mall. Of course, Doc, I'll be there. Hangs up. So now we see what he and his friends are up to. They have, without permission, set up a rooftop concert complete with an enormous banner and confetti cannons and one pyrotechnic cannon. It's a beautiful day, and the students are outside having lunch when suddenly this show starts. Now, it could be seen as an attempt to increase the popularity of his band, but his low-key reason is it's actually one of those elaborate promposals that were all the rage in 2015. Things go horribly wrong. The PA speakers get overloaded and die, like just straight up short out with sparks flying through them. I know that can't actually happen, but it's visually fun. The banner was recently painted, and so as it swings down, it just sloshes paint over people, and the pyro cannon sets the confetti on fire, and so students have to run as fiery ash is falling down on them, and they're all screaming, and it's just pandemonium. So Marty is waiting outside the principal's office for his parents. His girlfriend comes to break up with him. What? Why? Because that was humiliating. You always do this kind of thing. It's always too big, too crazy. We can't just go to a movie. You have to rent a limo. We can't just go out to dinner. You have to take me to the nicest restaurant in the city. Well, you're worth it. I want to treat you how you deserve. You can't break up with me for that. We started dating because I thought you were someone I would like to get to know better. But now it's been 5 months, and I don't know you any better, and I don't think you know me any better. You don't like me. You just like having a girlfriend. Marty is crushed. She leaves, and his very bland dad comes to pick him up. Car ride home, George, the dad, gives Marty a talking to, but it eventually shifts to why is Marty so upset. Marty spills about his girl problems. Son, let me give you some advice. No offense, Dad, but you and Mom go out for cheeseburgers for date night. I don't think you're exactly a well of romantic knowledge. Dad tries to give the advice anyway, but the conversation's essentially over and Marty's ignoring him now. The family eats dinner together, which includes Marty's living grandparents, and his sister mentions that she got asked to the prom. Lorraine, their mom, gets really excited and starts talking about how much she loved her first prom with George. She then starts into the story about how on that night George convinced her to start dating him. Marty is in the mood to hear these kind of romantic stories right now, though it does have hints about things that are going to come up later inside the movie, and there actually might be a conversation between his grandparents about the time that they got together, which will come into play inside of the last movie. So he grumpily leaves the table for his room. Lorraine comes in, tells him that she's sorry because she didn't know about the breakup. She asks if he wants to talk. No, well, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, blah, blah, blah. She leaves. Midnight approaches, and Marty goes to the mall. We meet Doc. There's a time machine. What's wrong, Marty? Something's bothering you. How can you always tell? Intuition. Jennifer dumped me. I apologize for this, Doc Brown. I've actually not worked on that impression, like, at all, really, in my life, which seems like an oversight. But yeah, it's bad. Anyway. Oh, that's too bad. That wasn't sincere. Oh, I know when you're upset, you know when I'm lying. Yeah, it looks that way. Why are you lying? Jennifer was never right for you. What do you know? I'm a love expert. Clara made sure of that. Yes, in my version, Doc already had a wife. There's the experiment with the time machine. It works. Doc tells Marty how it works. We need an alternative to the Libyan terrorists this time around. Not sure what it needs to be, but regardless, Doc has plutonium. Things go wrong again. Marty thinks Doc is dead, and he ends up jumping back to 1985. Marty meets his parents, and his dad is a full-on hair-spiked 80s punk, while his mom is really straight-laced. George is clearly nuts about her and is actually about to talk to her when Marty interrupts it, and his mom decides that he's pretty cute. Things play out fairly similarly from there. Marty meets Doc Brown, only this time he meets his still-living wife, Clara, and they have to come up with a way to send Marty back to 2015. Now, I don't think that we'd want to do the lightning storm again, because that sequence is just about perfect. So the only options would be a subpar version of it or an exact duplicate. So we would want to come up with something else to do here. And I'm not sure what. I haven't figured it out yet. I kind of like the idea of Marty and Doc planning a heist into a government facility to steal plutonium, honestly. One difference is that Marty keeps trying really hard to get Lorraine to notice George, but it keeps not working. Everything that he does using his natural penchant for grand gestures drives a wider wedge between the two, and she actually keeps liking George less and less. Clara tells Marty something that clues him into the idea that maybe he should try coaching George into actually really getting to know Lorraine and what she likes. That finally works, and they get together. This is less exciting on paper than the original, so we'll have to really think out how this works. Maybe not clue the audience into the fixed loop concept yet, so that there's still tension over Marty's existence being in jeopardy. Marty goes back to the present. Doc survived thanks to Marty's letter. This is called a pregnant pause. Anyway, next day, Marty's sister Linda apologized to him and says that she's sorry about Jennifer. I'm also going to spend some time on Marty and his sister's relationship inside of this one for reasons. Suddenly, Doc shows up and says that Marty needs to come with him and bring Linda. Why Linda? Because they need to help her kids with something in the future. Marty convinces Linda to go with them, and so now we're in 2045 for movie 2, and we're going to spend pretty much the whole thing here. Flying cars, fusion energy, hydrogen-powered cars, the works. Linda's kids are going through a rough patch of hanging out with the wrong crowd, and they barely talk to their parents. Marty and Linda become her kids' friends to, be there for them throughout this ordeal. Maybe we don't have to have Linda here, but I really like the idea of Marty and Doc repeatedly having to try to stop her from finding out who her husband is. Eventually, Marty and maybe Linda get the kids to a better place. Seeing that, Marty hopes that he and Jennifer will have kids together one day. Doc kind of mocks the relationship as a high school fling, which makes Marty kind of mad. He thinks it can go all the way. Oh, trust me, Marty, when you meet the right girl, you'll know. It'll be different. Meeting Jennifer was different. No, it wasn't. I don't think. They return in 2015 and something goes wrong to send Marty and Doc all the way back to 1955. Now they're stuck and have to figure out how to get home. Do we need to worry about bumping into the young version of you, Doc? No, I don't live here yet. Meanwhile, Marty's grandmother and grandfather are inside of the middle of a Romeo and Juliet thing, either because of their families or I kind of like the idea of opposing greaser gangs. Marty has to work as a go-between to get the two of them together, and it's miserable but also pretty funny. Finally, Doc gets the time machine working and Marty swears off time travel from now on. Oh, well, never say never, Marty. They make their daring attempt to jump the time machine forward. At some point through all this, Doc has given Marty his coat, and now when they're attempting to get into the future, Marty falls out and misses the jump and bumps his head. Now he's stranded in 1955. He wakes up to two cops asking him if he's okay. They find his wallet and tell them that they're taking him home. They get there, the door's unlocked, and he convinces the police that he's okay for them to leave him so that he can leave once they do before the actual homeowners return. As he's about to leave, he sees an envelope with his name on it and opens it up. Dear Marty, it is with great regret that I inform you that I won't be able to pick you up. You are stuck in 1955. The time machine was destroyed when I jumped forward, and I will never be able to rebuild it. It turns out that there was some fluke inside of my designs, some error that made the time machine work, and I will never be able to replicate it. However, you are not without resources. I traveled back to 1885 at some point and made several investments that are now yours. This house is yours, and your fortune is sizable at this point. I know you're wondering how I knew to do all that, and I know how hard this is to read and accept. And I know both of those things because I'm you. Marty pulls out the wallet that the cops looked at. It was in Doc's jacket, and it says, Emmett Brown, born 1939. This is going to be hard. It's going to suck for a while, but I know you can make it through because I did. Please believe me when I tell you that you have a great life. Also, there's no point in you keeping an eye out for Clara. She and I both lied to you about her name because we knew that this would happen. Stay safe, Dr. Marty McFly. P.S. That's the first time I've used that name in 60 years. Cut to the present day where Marty's family is slowly accepting what Doc is telling them. Then he gives them a DVD full of footage of Marty's life through the years as Doc Brown. So that's the pitch and my big twist. People have long said that the weirdest thing about the series is that a high school is friends with an elderly scientist and they want to know how that happened. And so this is kind of my explanation of that. That's rough and it needs more details. I've not scripted anything out, but those are the bones. So what do you think? Is it a start? Are you curious enough to be okay with it existing? And give me several $1 million. As always, let me know in the comments. If you're subscribed, you'll see me next time. Bye.